Stories of an Aircraft Builder. 2006 to 2008. More and more, it's unbelievable. The work on the Fokker E3 had barely begun when I received a message from Peter Jackson, who in the meantime had been thinking about having a Fokker D.VIII built by me. We discussed the whole thing and I told him that it made more sense to start now than to start again later. However, he made it clear that the first two aircraft, especially Oliver Wolf's, should not suffer under the new aircraft. In the meantime, there were more problems on this track than expected. Agreed payments failed to materialize and his aircraft steadily fell behind, also due to his failure to report the project to the LBA, which is the German Civil Aviation Authority. The whole thing was documented on the internet, and of course it was also noticeable to the outside world that an aircraft was falling further and further behind. The why and wherefore was not visible to the outside world and was not communicated by me. Why should it be? Even if it would fit well right now, it is unfortunately still not our topic. I can only repeat it. Patience. It will come. I was able to report to Peter Jackson with a clear consciousness that another Fokker D.VIII was certainly not the reason for delays on this front. To mention it briefly, the first two Fokker D.VIIs were now under construction. The two E3s for Peter Jackson plus another one for me, as well as three Fokker C1s as described in part 27 of this series, plus the creation of the drawings for the Rumpler C4 and now another D.VII, in addition to construction of a Pfalz D3 and a D3A, were also contractually agreed with Peter Jackson. But that wasn't the end of those months. A short time later Peter Jackson asked me if I could build him another D.VII. He would like to have an early series machine and one of the later production models, so that he could fly both side by side and show them to the public in New Zealand. So that would be 4 D.VIIs being built in parallel, with the new two first being brought up to the standard of the existing ones. In terms of time, it could all be done, especially as no real deadlines were given, as I don't go in for some things like that. All new agreements were made verbally between me and Peter Jackson and his right-hand man Matthew Trevitsky on an equal footing, as I thought, with a handshake. With the offices in Wellington and his company Wararapa Aviation Limited, it all seemed to be settled. So why not? The perfect wave, let's ride it. Space was the big problem then. That was the time when the new hangar was built and new space became available. But still, as with Fokker back then, the fuselages were stacked on top of each other. It was a picture for the gods. Believe it or not, but for me it was a real time machine. My works were not as big as Fokker's back then, and my output of airplanes was naturally lower, but the overall circumstances. The bleak early years, the sudden upswing, the growing number of aircraft in the hangars, all this gave me an insight into what Fokker must have experienced as a person. A side of him that I would certainly never have become so aware of if I hadn't to climb over fuselages or hang them from the ceiling in order to have enough space. The historian in me knows all this from the photographs of the years 1914 through 1918. But to feel it inside when you open the factory gates in the morning is something completely different. No one can take that away from me, and no one else will be able to experience it again so soon. Nevertheless, a list of priorities had to be drawn up, and so I asked Peter Jackson what was most important to him. The fuselages and tail fins of the E3s were then hung on the ceiling and on the hangar walls, and the construction of the Fokker D.VII was brought forward. These were now to be completed for all concerned, and as soon as they were out of the way, the construction of the E3 should continue. And that was the moment when one of the D.VII people thought it would now go on for him without him taking on the financial burdens we had agreed on. And because it didn't work out that way, because Engels isn't completely stupid either, that was the moment when the foundation was laid for all the later quarrels. But as I said, more on that later. After all, it wasn't an issue even at the time. In the end, however, everything turned out quite differently than planned, and the aforementioned list of priorities was overturned again. So the main focus was now on the 4 Fokker D.VIIs, and in the evenings with Hartmut on the drawings of the Rumpler C4 and the rib construction for the C1. At about this time, Langton Belcher of Australia completed his research on the wing of the Fokker E5 or D.VIII respectively, and had Koloman Meyerhofer in Austria build a wing for the D.VIII based on his excellent research. I don't know anything about the arrangement between the two, and I have nothing to say about that, but I do know that Langton allowed Koloman to make some wings based on Langton's documents and then sell them to interested parties. One of these interested parties was Peter Jackson. Peter Jackson is not only known as an enthusiast, but also as a collector, and he has employed people all over the world to look for and collect all kinds of things for him, be it artifacts or photo albums or other historical interesting things. And so it happened that he unexpectedly sent me to Vienna to assess an aviation history collection for him, which he was considering buying. A lot of stuff for a lot of money. When I came back from Vienna, he told me that he had now also bought 2 wings from Koloman and asked if I would like to build the rest of the airplanes for him, as he was slowly reaching the limits of his capacity in Wellington with his own aviation construction company, the Wararapa Aviation Limited, and I was the specialist when it comes to Fokkers anyway. Well, what the heck, let's just do that too. The only important thing for me was that he was willing to accept the delay that this caused. Yes, was the simple statement, and so the contracts were changed again verbally, and the construction of 3 Fokker D.VIIIs was started, 2 for Koloman wings, which were delivered to me shortly afterwards, and 1 for me at the same time, for which I would build the wing myself. Priority was now given to the D.VIII, and the D.VII would take a backseat. The world, which observing all this without knowing the background, naturally had plenty of fun to speculate. There was nothing mysterious about it, however. The payment was right, and if your boss wants something, then you do it if you can. I am also a person who follows through with what he starts. Others may not know this, and others may not understand it either, but from my point of view, what may have looked like things were started and then not finished was not the case. The direction remained the same, only the journey became longer. The working hours became unbelievable, and no normal employee would have put up with that. That was fine with me. It was my dream to build airplanes, and I could live it out here. My company, which I founded in 2005, was basically a one-man operation. At no time did I have employees in the sense of salaried staff. But I was never alone either. Of course, my family and friends helped when things got bulky or unwieldy. So I did all the work up to that point on my own. At this time, Shirley Gerard came to see me. Somehow she heard about me and brought a folder full of photographs of wings she had covered. Shirley told me funny stories about how she found her way into this milieu, and also that she had a company in the States called Mudflap Aviation, which mainly did wood and covering work for historic airplanes. Her husband was offered a position in Germany, and so the whole family moved here to Baden-Württemberg. Her longing for aircraft construction then drove her to me. We got on quite well together. She was hard to get rid of, and came by regularly. It took me a while to realize what she actually wanted. She just wanted to build airplanes, and that's what she did with me. There was enough work for her to do, so she got involved. She was good at woodwork and all the covering work. The hours she was able to put in made a huge difference to all the projects. If you look at our working time sheets at the time, you'll be amazed that someone would voluntarily invest so much work in such a project. But that's how it was. The monthly hours we worked in this way were always between 300 and 400. Between 10 to 15 hours a day went into the projects for Peter Jackson, followed by extra hours for my own projects. You couldn't win a flower pot with a regular 8-hour day. For those who don't believe it, It's definitely doable. The D.VIII was the first aircraft that I completed for New Zealand. And now you know why the nickname of my own D.VIII is Cuckoo. It was an absolutely unexpected cuckoo's egg that was last to be laid in my nest and the first to be hatched. I must also confess that I never liked the D.VIII very much. It was always somehow misshaped for my sense of beauty. But I must also confess that she got prettier and prettier every day I worked on her. The construction of the 3 airplanes progressed well. After all, only one wing had to be built. For the other 2 airplanes it was enough to build all the other parts except the engine itself. I was loaned a 9-cylinder rotary engine by Aviation Limited to adapt the engine system, which was later also used for photographic purposes. However, this was an 80 horsepower Leron, but that didn't detract from the overall effect. The suspension is almost identical, only the front mounting ring in the engine mount has a smaller bolt circle. By that time, New Zealand began building a number of Ober-Ossel UR2 rotary engines as reproductions. As I needed such an engine for my D.VIII, I negotiated with Peter Jackson that I should get a new build UR2 by TVAL in exchange for the second Fokker D.VII that he wanted from me. Everything was agreed and went perfectly. This also ensured that the first aircraft in my own flying museum actually had an authentic engine. I have already described the museum idea in detail in part 25, The Time Machine, of this series. I couldn't have wished for anything better. A dream was now actually getting wings. So I thought. It was an absolutely crazy time. A time that allowed me to realize another dream of my childhood. Flying. But that adventure I will tell next time.